Hello and welcome back to my humble show. So, I intended to spend a decent amount of time tackling this particular topic, as referenced in the title of this video, but this is going to have to be a very, very short show because I have to go back to work soon. I had a couple of things come up while here on my lunch break, so yeah. My apologies if I rush through this and react to this being a thread from my X account. Follow me there if you're into that sort of thing, at Articulate Thought. That's THGHT, no vowels there. It's the thought that counts. But yes, let me go ahead and get right into this. Senate Democrats, who apparently either don't know or don't care what/who a woman is, scientifically speaking, voted down a cloture motion on Monday, therefore blocking Bill S9, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act of 2025, from further debate. A 3/5 majority vote would have been required to take the next step towards protecting girls/women in their respective sports. But as you can see in the screenshots below, which I will show you momentarily, not a single Democrat dared to share a shred of decency or to shed a lick of light on what it even means to be a good old garden variety female. At this point, if Democrats had their own party dictionary, I imagine their entire definition of what a woman is would be summarized in references to having abortions and or being trans, which is quite a counterintuitive conclusion. Shall I say delusional? So, 4 screenshots to summarize what exactly it is I'm talking about from the Washington Times, a headline from March 3. Senate Democrats block GOP bill to keep male-born athletes out of female sports. Such poor sports. Not the females, but the politicians, the Democrat politicians in this case. All right, so here you see 51 yays, 45 nays. You might think that is a majority. Well, sometimes it's different in a cloture motion, which requires the aforementioned 3/5 vote. Motion to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed to the consideration of the S9 bill, the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports bill, that is. Yeah. Another screenshot here. Senate Dems sink GOP-led bill to bar trans athletes from women's sports. These are the faces of all of the Democrats who voted in the negative, voted not to really even bring the bill to the table to talk about it, really talk about it. So, a lot of them on that list, pretty much all of them except for 2 who didn't vote, 2 Democrats, that is. Here you see the names, all of the nays, all the naysayers. In the Senate, obviously, from Schiff to Schumer, from Klobuchar to Markey, from Fetterman to Gillibrand. You see them. You know them. You don't particularly like them. Particularly like them. You don't. I hope not, because what's to like at this point, really? You tell me. John Fetterman, he tempted us a couple of times to like him, but then he was like, just kidding. And now, a word from Grok 3 on cloture vote fundamentals, in case you're wondering what the deets are. In the United States Senate, a cloture motion or a cloture vote requires a 3/5 majority to end debate on most matters and proceed to vote or to a vote on the underlying issue. With a full Senate of 100 members, this means 60 votes are needed to invoke cloture. Assuming all senators are present and voting, this rule outlined in the Senate rule number, whatever that is, I'm not familiar with all of those digits, sadly. Though I know what Title IX means. Or is in Roman numerals. But yeah, whatever that is designed to limit filibusters and ensure that legislation or nominations can move forward despite opposition. And yes, my cat is in my lap right now. The specific threshold can vary slightly depending on the context. Some rare cases, like certain budget-related measures, might have different rules. But for the vast majority of cloture votes, it's 60 out of 100. On to the next portion of this thread. And these are more of my own thoughts. Feel free to disagree with me. Let me know in the comments below. What say you? Let me do that again. What say you? My cat, Lulu, would like to know. She just read it. Can't you tell? She's reading right now. What say you? She wants to know. Let her know. Back to this. Of course, a day after Senate Democrats rejected the opportunity to actually protect actual women, woke Congress members, largely birthing people, as you can see, showed up at President Trump's congressional address dressed in pink, apparently to suddenly pretend that there's something about women and literally anyone who claims to be one that's worth protecting. Because anyone can be one, according to them. I mean, if you happen to ask any one of them what they think a woman even is, they'll turn into Ketanji Clown Jackson. Did I say clown? I meant Brown Jackson, saying, "I'm not a biologist. I'm not a biologista." I did mean to say biologist, but my cat is getting out of control here. What a catastrophe. Yeah. Ketanji Brown Jackson saying, "I'm not a biologist," or some such nonsense. Biologist also sounds catchy. Yeah. From one day to the next here. Cloture vote, cloture motion, and then the continuing clown show, as seen on the screen. Notice the purple hair. Anyways, congressional Democrats have been pandering to the wokest iterations of gender ideology for years, other than when some of them suddenly decided to distance themselves from it during Kamala's campaign. But now they're waking up woker than ever, out of sheer opposition to all things Trump, despite their incompetent cause growing increasingly unpopular even among their own constituents. Even CNN is forced to admit this. Let me go ahead and pull these up. These screenshots from one of their segments. Okay, the terminology they use is a little bit confusing, as it always is in transgenderism. They say transgender female athletics or athletes. And by that they mean biological males. In women's sports, allow, 18% say that. 18% say allow. Oppose, 79% say that. 79% say oppose. So approximately 80% of people who were polled here. This is a CNN announcement. Say they are opposed to biological males competing in women's sports. Shouldn't be all that controversial. It's interesting to me how many times the Democrats say, "Why are we so focused on this?" Well, for one, because of them, because they made it an issue in the first place. They made it an issue, and then they're like, "Why is this an issue to you?" They say, It affects such a small portion of the population. So why are we talking about it? Why are we discriminating against them? Well, we're not really discriminating against them, but if it's such a small portion of the population, then why must all of the actual biological females, the girls and women, scientifically speaking, be hindered from living their lives and competing in their sports in the way that they should be for the sake of such a small minority, according to the Democrats, who like to point out how irrelevant, but also how relevant this issue is. Sorry, I digress. It's a little bit incoherent to explain because it's incoherent altogether. One more screenshot from this news segment. This is from 2021 to 2025. In 2021, 62% were opposed to biological males being allowed to compete in women's sports. Now it's, of course, 79, approximately 80%. So that's why I said what the Democrats are advocating is becoming increasingly unpopular, yet they're pushing it even harder. That's because they're pushing anything that's in opposition to Trump. So here's the clip from CNN, a visual demonstration in Democrats digging their hole deeper. This was posted by Rapid Response 47, White House content creation. I can ignore the caption and just play it for you. Let me go ahead and do that.
I think these numbers are really illuminating on this topic because I just think there's such a clear trend among the American public. So transgender female athletes in women's sports, only 18% of the country says that they should be, in fact, allowed to participate in women's sports. Compare this to the opposition. I mean, my goodness gracious, 79%. You rarely get 79% of the country to agree on anything, but they do, in fact, agree on the idea of opposing transgender female athletes in women's sports. But it's not just the here and now, Laura. It's not just the here and now. What we're actually seeing is a trend on this particular issue, and it's going in the direction of opposition. So take a look here. Okay, transgendered female athletes, and amongst those Americans who oppose them in women's sports, back in 2021, it was 62%. A majority, but, not anywhere close to a ginormous majority, right? A clear majority, but not a ginormous majority. But then again, you look here in 2025, you see it at 79%. So it's not just that the majority of Americans are opposed to transgender female athletes in women's sports. It's that the opposition has become considerably larger in just the last 4 years.
Voila. No need to further explain that. I already did my best to spell out exactly what he just said. One more time, in case what I was saying about the minority, the irrelevant/relevant minority in all of this. In case what I was saying didn't make sense, let me reiterate it. Democrats will say, the trans community, such a small community. Why are we even worried about them? Okay, if they're such a small community, why does the world have to revolve around them? Why do all of the actual biological females have to suffer for the sake of such a small few? Okay, Leah Thomas is the perfect example. Walking around in the ladies' locker room, letting it all hang out. And they were afraid to speak out about it at the time. And medals were taken from them as this biological male who had been very unsuccessful swimming against other men, well, he jumped in the pool with them and began to wreak havoc. So, yeah. It's another example of Democrats saying something like, it's never happening. It's never happening. It doesn't happen. Also, it's great that it's happening, and we must support it happening. We must support it continuing to happen. Yeah. Another thing they're very commonly known for is saying, look at me, look at me. Why are you looking at me? Stop looking at me. I demand your attention also. Why are you paying me so much attention? These are just basic understandings of, I don't know, human psychology. Heavily involved in the Democrat Party, at least. And Republicans are far from perfect, but at least there's an iota of common sense. What does it say about the Democrat Party when their position on women's rights includes the right for men to call themselves women and to be affirmed in their delusions? Let me read that one more time. What does it say about the Democrat Party when their position on women's rights includes the right for men to call themselves women and to be affirmed in their delusions? Notice how the people telling us that sex isn't binary also insist that anyone who identifies as the opposite sex must be able to attempt to transition to that opposite sex, therefore acknowledging the binary. In other words, the only transition options just so happen to be male to female and female to male. So people are like, there is no binary. You can be whatever you want to be. Also, are you going to become a man? Or are you going to become a woman? You go get your operation done. There on the chopping block, laying it all out on the table, and you're going to be transitioning either to male or to female. At least the attempt will be made, sadly. Because there is a binary. I mean, you don't go to the store and there's like female size clothing, women's, in other words, male size clothing, men, in other words, and then there's like I don't know, Sasquatch size clothing. There's alien size clothing. There's like third, fourth, fifth, sixth gender clothing categories. It's just the women's clothing and the men's clothing. If you're a man who wants to be a woman, then you buy women's clothing. It's whatever. I guess. I don't even know if I'm making much sense at this point, but that's because none of this makes sense, as I'll continue to point out. Some traditions must be maintained for the sake of everyone's sanity. Notice how there's no need for legislation banning biological females from women's sports, since there's no biological advantage available for women to even have the incentive to compete in men's sports in the way that men have been incentivized to compete in women's sports. Seems like an obvious point to make. The legislation on the table here is about keeping biological males out of women's sports because there are no biological females dominating in men's sports. Because once again, there is a binary. And there is a clear difference between men and women, which has been blurred by delusional Democrats who are pushing all of this nonsense. Yeah. And once again, you see them at Trump's congressional address wearing their pink attire. Of course, they also had some bingo signs. You only see one here. But some Democrats stormed out. Another Democrat was thrown out. The rest of them just pouted, refused to stand, refused to cheer, even for victims of heinous crimes. A 13-year-old cancer survivor. They couldn't even applaud a 13-year-old cancer survivor. Yeah, that's the state of the Democrat Party right now. And here's my way more satirical take on the matter. It's not much more ridiculous than what Democrats are literally advocating for these days, though. So I posted this on my other X account. Breaking news! Senate Democrats have put forward a bill that would ban biological females from women's sports, citing an apparent need for more opportunities and recognition among trans women, or as Republicans refer to them, biological males. Can you imagine? Yeah. Imagine that. Democrats putting forward a bill that would ban biological females from women's sports to give the transes more opportunities. And they will also claim that this is all an attempt by Republicans to ban, as they say, trans women from sports. Not true. They just must compete with their biological counterparts and their biologically accurate categories. Which, if there's really no difference between the genders, i.e. the sexes, as the Democrats say, then it's not going to kill a trans person to compete with whoever, right? Okay, so that's something that's confusing to me. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit worked up here. So, Democrats would have us believe that there's not a biological incentive or advantage when biological males compete against biological females. But if you force via a bill those biological males to continue competing against other biological males, we're supposed to believe that there's then a disadvantage for the trans women, the so-called trans women. So you can't really have it both ways. That's practically what they're claiming. Well, impractically, what they're claiming at this point. That if a male who says, I'm a woman today, competes against other women, there's no advantage. But if he is told, no, you must compete against other men, biological males, then there's somehow a disadvantage. No. You're clearly not a biologist. So I also added under that, a sponsor of the bill, the satirical bill, was heard saying, you're only a real woman if you're trans or have had at least one abortion. So yeah, the pink attire goes on, and they're out and about, parading around, masquerading around, claiming abortion is specifically a women's issue, and also anyone can be a woman. Make it make sense. Do it. I dare you. Make it make sense. I'm gonna have to wrap this up. I've spent more time on this than I intended to. I had a bunch of other information laid out here. Roll call vote, 119th Congress, first session. Question on cloture motion to proceed. Motion to invoke cloture. Motion to proceed. S9. Here's the yays and nays. I already showed you a screenshot of the nays, but you can see the yays as well. And also those who did not vote, which included Slotkin, who gave the official Democrat response to Donald Trump's congressional address. Thought that was interesting. She did not vote for some reason. Silence is complicity, though. In this case, is it not? So 2 Republicans didn't vote. 2 Democrats didn't vote. Republicans have the majority. Therefore, they won out. But they needed a 3/5 majority in order to get their way. So, measure title. A bill to provide that for purposes of determining compliance with Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 in athletics, sex shall be recognized based solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth, which leftists refer to at this point as being assigned at birth, as though the doctors don't know what they're talking about. So on the one hand, Democrats are like, I can't speak to that because I'm not a biologist. Name drop Ketanji Brown Jackson. And on the other hand, they're like, but those biologists, those actual biologists, who cares what they say? Because they're just assigning genders willy-nilly at birth. They don't know what they're talking about. You can be whatever you want to be and compete in whatever sport category you want to compete in. And it's not unfair because we're all the exact same, even though we're not. Unless you're forced to compete against your biological sex, then it's super duper unfair. Incoherence. The epitome of incoherence. So there's some more information here about it, but you get the draft. You get the drift. There's that Washington Times article. A Christian Post article. Senate Democrats block bill barring boys from competing in girls' sports. Yada, 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 bing, bang, boom. Fox News article. Bill to prevent males from women's sports receives no support from Senate Dems. Who were they? The Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act failed to clear a procedural hurdle known as cloture. Politico article. This is an older one. Similar bill in the House. House passes bill restricting transgender athletes from women's sports. This one is in limbo land right now. You probably can't see it, but it says here, passed the House. So the House was working on something. Senate was working on something. Both of those somethings are in limbo land right now. Though the one in the Senate clearly didn't even make it onto the table for official debate. But this says H.R. 28, Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act of 2025. Very similar. The text of the act is down here. The amendment, or the amend the Education Amendments of 1972. Sorry, I think I read that wrong. To amend the Education Amendments of 1972 to provide that for purposes of determining compliance with Title IX of such act in athletics, sex shall be recognized based solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth. See, sounds the same as the Senate bill. Will it bounce back? Only time will tell. Republicans have the majority, but there's still speed bumps. And that's what I've got. I've got to get back to work. I am running very late right now. There we go. Peace.